Let's talk business. This guy comes to town every Tuesday. Are you free Tuesday?
Yeah, I'm free Tuesday.
You can't stop what you can't see.
This guy came from the outside. He was a pro. He was fast.
In the art of the kill, Leon was the master.
Somebody's coming up. Somebody's serious.
He never missed a hit. He never got caught.
You're indestructible. Bullets slide off you. You played with them.
And above all else, he never had a reason to care. Until now.
I like these calm little moments before the storm.
My family was shot down by DEA officers.
3 kids here. One of them is missing. Find her.
Please open the door. Please.
From the director of La Femme Nikita.
If you don't help me, I'll die tonight. I can feel it.
An innocent girl with no one else to turn to.
What exactly do you do for a living?
Cleaner.
You mean you're a hitman? Cool.
A perfect assassin.
I need you to help me, Leon. I want to get those dirtbags who killed my brother.
With someone to finally believe in.
Change ain't good. Remember that, Leon.
I will.
They're about to come face to face with a cop who's crossed the line.
Bring me everyone. What do you mean everyone?
Everybody, and welcome once again to GeekFest Rants. My name is Carlos Perron, and I have James here on the line. Say hi, James.
Hello, hello.
Well, we are continuing with our little side series that we've been doing lately, kind of profiling certain directors we admire with very unusual films, and not only their most popular films, but as we've done in the past, the little offshoot quirky movies they put out here or there. And one of them that we kind of seem to come back sometimes, and it's like we, in conversations, it's like the type of film that, you might be flipping through the channels on cable and it pops up and you're like, oh, let's just leave it on. It's a cool movie. We're talking about director Luc Besson. And depending on how you are familiar with this director, it depends on when you kind of jumped into his films. For me, I would say primarily it would be the movie Leon, the Professional. But before that came out, there were a couple of other entries. Most of them would be foreign films, which is where he made his bread and butter and kind of has dipped in and out of that market many times. But James, why don't you tell us about the first film that I remember this is one that you used to tell me about that I haven't yet to see, called The Big Blue.
Well, that's how I first came across who Luc Besson was. And it's a beautiful movie. It's a little, well, I don't know. It's a little slow for American audiences. I've tried to get people to watch it, including you, and obviously it didn't quite work. So it's a slow, beautiful feeling kind of movie. When I watch it, something about it makes me want to go to Europe. It makes me want to go to the ocean. And I really like the way it looks. And basically, the big star that we would know is Jean Reno. And he basically is one of the two main guys. And we know him because of all the other movies he's done with Luke, and as well as all the other movies he's done. The best known American person in it is Rosanna Arquette, who may or may not have been huge at that point. Griffin Dunn is in it, but it's a small role. But basically, this movie came out and it was a bomb in America. It was pretty popular in Europe. The American version had a different ending. Like we've talked about with Blade Runner and some other movies, the Europeans seem to be able to handle unhappy endings. Americans need to have happy endings. So I'm sure this was tested. It didn't go well, and they made it more ambiguous, and there's a dolphin, and maybe the guy lived, et cetera, et cetera. I don't want to say too much to ruin it because I'd really like our audience to check it out. So I don't want to say exactly what goes down and who comes and who goes. But let me just say, it really is a well-made movie. The soundtrack was done by Eric Serra, who we'll talk about again and again because he basically collaborated with Luc Besson on most of his movies, as well as doing the GoldenEye soundtrack, which was a big deal. Now, if you watch GoldenEye, you'll notice the music is very similar to a lot of these movies, especially The Big Blue, and it's a little bit different than what you'd expect from a James Bond movie, but it works. It's not the most popular. We've talked about the James Bond soundtracks and how that one probably didn't go over hugely.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be mentioned as everybody's most popular one. But, it was a good soundtrack. Unfortunately, again, with the American release being a little different, they took that music out and they put Bill Conti music. Now, I have to be honest with you, I don't remember the Bill Conti music. That's how I saw it first. I guarantee it. And
if you say Bill Conti, all I can think of is Rocky.
yeah, well, funny enough, Bill Conti also did a James Bond score. He did For Your Eyes Only, and, he's very talented. Right. But it just, in hindsight, in my head, I can't imagine it was right for this movie. But, it is what it is. I know that's a cliche, but the movie is still awesome, and I eventually was able to get it. It took me a while, but I was eventually able to get a European disc, I guess, or something. So it's in French. I don't even know if I have subtitles. I don't remember, but it's listed as the actual Le Grand Bleu, which is, the French title. And I just really love the movie. I hope you guys check it out. I hope you eventually check it out. I've told you your wife will like it, because there's dolphins in it.
There's lots of dolphins, yeah.
That should have been a way for you guys to snuggle up, next to the TV and watch something. But, I know you got a lot of catching up to do, so that'll be somewhere on the list.
Yeah, this is one of the movies that I would have to kind of start working backwards, like we do with some of these directors.
Yeah.
You start to kind of work backwards.
I'm telling you, once you get going, it's fun, it's interesting, it's quirky. The guys are competitors, but it has a good camaraderie in it. It's kind of like scenes in Chariots of Fire. The guys are competitors, but there's respect and camaraderie, and then they eventually become very tight, and et cetera, et cetera. It becomes a big deal how the movie, continues and, the eventual conclusion. So That's how I entered the Luc Besson world.
I see. Well, as I mentioned before, mine was The Professional, but before we get to The Professional, we have one more that is where I think most people might have gotten their first peek at him, and that is with the follow-up to The Big Blue called Nikita, also sometimes referred to as La Femme Nikita.
Now, this is the original version, not
the original,
series.
not the American remake or the television series that came afterwards, but this is a film that, in a way, it kind of started to kind of define his style. The Big Blue was more of a drama, I believe. This is more of an action, crime, super, ultra-violent type of scenario.
It started a genre, and I don't know how much credit he gets, but those kind of movies, like even things like The Matrix and a number of other big movies from the 90s, owe a little bit to the way Nikita was.
They do, because yes, it kind of started, it was like a little spark. I think with The Professional, it exploded even bigger. I am going to mention that, but let's just talk about the movie itself. This is one that this is the one that I definitely have seen. And I remember the buzz going around the film about how it was very stylized fighting and stylized gunplay and gun battles and that sort of thing. This particular one is about a criminal who she is given the choice of, go to jail or become like a secret agent, a secret assassin, that sort of thing. And the movie is basically about how some of her assignments end up going wrong, and then they start kind of like coming after her as a result of some of the assassinations, and then she's on the run, from her employers, more or less. The cool thing about the movie is that it introduces the character of the cleaner, which is played by
Jean Reno.
Jean Reno, who then continues on the future movies.
It's been acknowledged that imagine it's his cousin in America type of thing. It's not the same character as that character, but Leon is a cleaner, and he's very similar, and he's played by the same actor, so you can see
right.
like there.
You can kind of see the connection between this and the next film. Exactly. And like I said, this is a movie that was, again, it was the critics seemed to like it. It was one of those offshoot films that all of a sudden, big shot critics are all of a sudden telling the audience, go see this foreign movie. You got to keep in mind, we're dealing with foreign movies, and a lot of people shy away from foreign movies like they're the plague. It's an excellent film. It was remade, like I said earlier, it was remade as Point of No Return with Bridget Fonda taking the lead role.
That was directed by John Badham, and didn't he do Saturday Night Fever, who we're big fans of?
Yeah, exactly.
So there's a lot of tie-ins to things we like, like you said, Bridget Fonda, and then they made the American version. It was basically, the American version was based on it with a different actress and more TV accessible, but that was created by Joel Surnow. He eventually did 24, but Joel Surnow had a lot to do with the initial seasons of Miami Vice. So there's a lot of things that we are all big on.
This is a little bit kind of, this and the next film is a little bit kind of like how in the late 80s, early 90s, you had the Hong Kong influence.
Yeah, and they even made a Hong Kong version of this. Which,
yeah.
This was based on Hong Kong style, which then they eventually made a Hong Kong version of it. So everything's tied in.
Right, but in his own little world, coming from France, they had their own little way of kind of influencing the action genre, the action crime genre, in a different way, with a different flavor, but it was something that the American market hadn't seen before, and then little by little starting adapting it, in their fight sequences and that sort of thing. And this leads to The Professional, which is how I first heard of the movie. I think at one point it was called just The Professional, and then it was Leon the Professional.
Yeah. There was, again, two different versions, an American version, and then when it became such a hit, they said, hey, not only is there more to this, we can actually release it for you. And I think we eventually got it on a DVD, like a director's cut style DVD. Is that right? Or Laserdisc?
Back then we were Laserdisc.
Yeah, we were still Laserdisc.
And it was like an expanded edition or this or that.
That might be how we first saw it, probably on Laserdisc, I would imagine.
It could be.
I don't think I saw this in the theater. I don't remember, but I don't think so.
No. The other thing about the Leon the Professional is the fact that it came out I believe it came out in 94, which was also around the time where, for example, Tarantino was coming into the mix, and Harvey Keitel was coming into the mix, right? And not so much Natural Born Killers, but we were in the post Reservoir Dogs into the beginning of Pulp Fiction. So you had this internal, super violent, funny in a way kind of film style that was the whole Tarantino thing going on. Even around the time that Bad Lieutenant was also out around that time, was another Harvey Keitel vehicle where you're dealing with very violent crime dramas.
I made you stop the Bad Lieutenant, if I recall.
Walked out. I think you walked out.
I walked out of your theater, which was your living room. It was a dark time in my life, and there was no way I could sit through that. So
I wouldn't say this is as powerful or as shocking as those films, but it was kind of like in that vein of films that were very heavily influenced by foreign action films, and they were kind of working their way into the mainstream, American cinema. So this particular one, again, it's a similar kind of story. This girl...
Well, let me say first, it's not just this girl. This girl is Natalie Portman. Not only is it her first role...
Very young.
It's her greatest role. I don't care what Oscar she won. I don't care that she was Queen Amidala, Padme, Nabari, whatever you want to... I don't care. This was her best role. This was probably her peak as far as I'm concerned, because she's so good. You don't even know she's 12 years old. She's so good an actress in this. And I rewatched it knowing we were going to eventually do this show. I rewatched it maybe 2 weeks ago. And it still holds up. And I didn't even watch the extended version because I didn't have access to it at that moment. It was, probably Netflix was getting rid of it or something. And I said, you know what?
Right. The original is longer than the U.S. version.
Right. And I probably saw the U.S. version, but it is fantastic. And in addition, it's got Gary Oldman in, and I know that's hard to say. Gary Oldman has had so many greatest roles, but this might be one of Gary Oldman's most fantastic roles as far as I'm concerned. Just the style. You want to kill him yourself by the end of the movie, and he gets what he gets. And in addition to that, you got Danny Aiello, who is really he plays a mob boss, but he's really a good guy. He's really like a father figure type to Leon. And I just was from beginning to end blown away by this movie. And I still think to this day, it doesn't even feel like it's the 90s. I mean, obviously, you watch the movie, it's got some cars, but it's almost a timeless movie of the way the characters are and Gary Oldman's character and the way it was shot. And I don't have any problem with this movie even 20 years later.
Well, the thing about Gary Oldman in this movie, just like the movie is kind of in a way connected to that Tarantino wave and the Bad Lieutenant wave, Abel Ferrara Bad Lieutenant wave, is Gary Oldman is coming off Romeo is Bleeding. I don't know if you ever saw that movie. Again, it's another one of these super hardcore violent crime dramas from that period where I remember he played like a very nasty cop, Bad Lieutenant-ish type of cop. And in this movie, he's following up. He's playing a bad guy. He's again playing a cop, I believe, who's super dirty. He's completely dirty. He's basically working for the mob, I believe. And he had a couple of roles like that where he was just playing a complete bastard. Forget Commissioner Gordon, from the Batman. This is the nasty,
complete opposite.
This is the Gary Oldman that at the time nobody thought he was gonna, live another 5 years because the guy was a complete disaster personally, but he was an unbelievable actor. He was just probably at his peak, at one of his peaks, because he's just great. Now, the other thing about this movie, there was some controversy about the flavor or the tone, the relationship between this assassin and this little girl that he's protecting.
Yeah, I mean, this is a French movie, so I bought it, and even then I knew French movies because I'd watch a lot of Truffaut, I'd watch, a ton of other French movies. So I knew the style and the way things go and the lovers and the ages, and it's really a whole different scene. And I have to tell you, you forget about and you have to remember she is a 12-year-old girl, but there's nothing untoward. He is very literally professional about the whole thing until basically the end when what's coming is coming, and he just says, yeah, I love you. You're what keeps me living. I want to live now. I don't want to be this killer, and but he has to protect her.
But the funny thing about this movie is that you could set this movie at many different periods in history. This could have been like a Chinese, feudal movie about a samurai protecting a young girl, or this could have been a Western about a cowboy protecting, a young person and that sort of thing. It kind of fits in many different genres, that kind of relationship, without making it basically dirty. You know what I mean? It's a protector, like a fatherly protector type of relationship. And because it's French, people automatically want to push it a little further than they should, I think.
And, I'm reading online, and we've heard about this for years, especially as Natalie Portman got bigger after the Star Wars movies, and then she went Oscar, that make a sequel. She can now be the badass, and you know what I mean? And they can find a way to turn it into something.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But I've been reading online that there's obviously legal issues, and with the movie company that made the movie and Besson, they're not like friends anymore, and then blah, blah, blah. So there's always some kind of business thing. If they wanted to get it done, I'm sure they could get it done. It's just not on anybody's front burner right now.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know what? As I'm starting to think as I get older, as much as you want more of something you love, leave well enough alone. It's an awesome movie. We both love it. Like Blade Runner, I'm not so thrilled that Blade Runner's coming with a sequel. Maybe it doesn't need one. You know what I mean? Like certain movies, leave it alone.
You never know. But
yeah,
what comes next for him, as far as we're concerned, is definitely original and different. And it's not like he's repeating himself. We're talking about The Fifth Element, probably I would say his biggest American success.
Yeah, and there's parts of this movie that just blow me away. I just absolutely love it, and I could watch it again and again.
Well, this is, again, it's Luc Besson directing. Star here is Bruce Willis. Gary Oldman returns as the bad guy in this one.
But he's a weird bad guy in this one.
He is so bizarre, because this is post-JFK Gary Oldman.
This whole movie is over the top in a number of ways, and it reminds me of the real world version of Zero the Hutt, or whatever his name was, because there are costumes by Jean-Paul Gaultier, which anybody who knows who that is, he's a designer who's very, very gaudy and elaborate and flamboyant.
Well, speaking of flamboyant and gaudy, we also get Chris Tucker.
Yeah, and that's the point. That is so weird, because Chris Tucker is known now as the Jackie Chan sidekick. He's also known from the Friday movies, and he's kind of like a manly guy with a silly voice and, kind of getting
but
high
here,
and things like that.
He's out there. He's out.
This is the type of role he took to get in. And I don't know if Chris Tucker today would take that, or even Chris Tucker today would tell young Chris Tucker to take this role, even though it's a success. It was a great movie. It just, everything about it works on its level, and there's actors in it that we know from all the walks of movies we've loved. Brian James, before he passed away, is in it. He's from Blade Runner.
And, Mila Jovovich.
Well, she's awesome as Lilu.
With her weird white dress
outfit,
that is
her outfit in this movie is like a cosplay dream come true. You constantly, if you go to any Comic-Con or anything, you see a Lilu. Luke Perry makes an appearance, like eventually Tiny Lister, which him. He's a big black actor who's kind of got a weird look. He's been in the Friday movies, in fact, but he's perfect in this movie. I don't know what else to say, but Ian Holm is in it.
Ian Holmes, he's a big shot.
You don't expect an Ian Holm to be in a movie like this, but he's perfect. He's just completely perfect in it. And the look, the futurism of the movie.
Well, that's the thing. He builds a whole world with this movie. I'm not going to say it's Blade Runner good in terms of how amazing, but the craft that went into putting this thing together is just mind-blowing.
I feel this movie has a tidbit of Blade Runner, a tidbit of, I don't know, some other just general science fiction.
It's got a little bit of Stargate, if you ever saw Stargate.
Yeah, I'd say, okay, there you go. That's probably the other one that's perfect. And the tiny, teeny, tiny little bit of the heavy metal movie. Now,
yes. There's a lot of, yes.
I know the heavy metal movie. You know the heavy metal movie. I wish our audience, if they don't know it, can find a way to see it. It's got to be online at the very least.
Well, we're going to have to work a way into working that movie into a show in itself.
Yeah, and that has a look and a feel that this movie finds a way to, and I don't even know if that's an accident or on purpose. I haven't really ever looked into it. But when I work in New York every day, I'm walking around New York, and there are times I feel like we're not that far away from the Fifth Element's version of New York.
Yeah, a lot of the designs, I couldn't tell you for sure if they were, but if you're into all the conceptual designs having to do with movies like Blade Runner or Alien or any of those 70s and early 80s movies, it has a lot of that. I know there's an artist, I think his name was Movius, who has a lot of that and again, maybe it's a European thing, maybe it's a French thing, but it's a very futuristic design that transferred really well to this movie. It's more than just retrofitting.
We talked about Eric Serra. I also love the soundtrack in this. I'm not sure how it holds up to other people. I own the soundtrack. I listen to it. There are pieces of it that are just brilliant and blow you away still. But the one thing, it's like a modern opera. And
the opera scene, yeah.
It's called the Diva Dance, and it was a real blow you away musical piece. And it's a big piece in the movie, and it still holds up. Like, I can play this now, and I almost like, wow, this is brilliant. I don't know why that didn't catch on more, and I guess it did at the time. It was a big deal. I remember this was always, as DVDs came out, this was one of the first ones they put out. As Blu-rays came out, this was one of because it has that look and feel in it, and then the sound. So it's something that's easy to sell to people when a new format comes out. That this is one of the ones you should have right away. Everybody wants their favorite movie, but this one has a little bit of everything: the colors, the music, the sound, the action, and it'll sell your new TV or sell your new whatever.
Yeah, and talk about a movie that surprisingly nobody made a sequel to, because you figure this is one of his most successful ones, and it's one of the most commercial ones, that somebody would have snatched it up right away and done sequels about it, because he's been involved in sequels of some of his other films, but for some reason this one they kind of left alone. I don't know if maybe the stars were not signed to do more. I mean, Bruce Willis is Bruce Willis was also kind of a very hot actor at the time. It was, this was post Pulp Fiction, so Bruce Willis was a hot commodity back then. Yeah,
and you're right about the sequel. Even if the film company, sometimes that happens, that they'll take a property that necessarily that the director doesn't necessarily want to, or in this case he's the creator as well. But no, it just hasn't happened. So I don't think it is. I think it's of its time and it's well done, but I don't think we'll see a sequel to that.
Yeah. Now, even though I would probably consider this to be the peak of his success, the late 90s, that period, mid to late 90s, Later on, in his career, not only he directed some films that are not very well known, but he also produced a number of films. And I think I'm just going to mention a few that are probably, we might recognize. One of them, it's called On Bak it's Muay Thai Warrior, which I'm sure nobody heard of it, but this is one of those martial arts films that kind of separate themselves from any other ones. We've had movies similar to this where all of a sudden like a movie like The Raid would come out and it's a whole new wave of displaying martial arts, where this one involved Thai martial arts, and it kind of made somewhat of a star of the lead character, because it's a completely different way of fighting that if you're into martial arts films, this is one that he produced, and I'm pretty sure that it might have had some sequels.
And the biggest part of it is the arrival of Tony Jaa, and that's probably the biggest.
He became a star from there.
Yeah, that's probably the biggest reason, because like when you talk about those other the Raid type movies or whatever these big movies are with these breakout stars and somebody that changes the that he's one of those type of guys. He's like when you watch him, you're watching a fighting ballet, not just,
right, and you're seeing something different. That's the thing. It's different and it's exciting and it's like, wow, this is actually entertaining. It's like you said, it's a ballet. It's a very choreographed, different way of realistic. In a way, it's realistic too. But if you're not familiar with that one, if you are familiar with the Transporter series of films, he produced all three of them. And he also produced the Taken films, those Liam Neeson films. Now, the Transporter ones, obviously, is one of the films that made him a superstar. Got him all the way through the Fast and Furious films, most notably.
And that was basically, that series of movies was extrapolated from a long-form commercial.
Yeah, the BMW commercial or something, right?
Exactly, and it wound up being a big deal. And again, I think those Transporter movies, while it might not be, a huge groundbreaking success, it changed how some of the movies were made in the 2000s, these type of action movies using a Statham kind of character or some of these other big guys from England or Asia or whatever.
They're like custom made for him, for his persona.
Yeah.
And the Taken movies, again, Liam Neeson, he's made 3 of them already. They're kind of repetitive after a while.
Somebody made a joke like, okay, the first time something happens, it happens. The second time, okay, maybe. By the third one, maybe you're just a bad dad,
You're the unluckiest dad in the world.
Yeah, so, I mean, I want to throw in that he also did the Taxi series, which, while it's not even probably known in America, it was a big series in, he produced them, but it was a big series in France, and, they basically, the American version was it was a little dicey, but it kind of took off in Europe, I guess. I don't really know. It's not my thing.
Well, I would say that the only time that I've heard his name pop up again in a very good way was, almost 20 years after The Fifth Element. Back in 2014, he put out the movie Lucy with
Scarlett
Johansson, which was a great action film. In a way, they're kind of capitalizing on her Avenger success, I think.
Like Nikita.
They're making her a star. They're making her a super action star. And yeah, more like Nikita. The action is there. It's very sci-fi because it's about her. She's like muling some drugs for somebody, and it's an experimental drug. And unfortunately, the bag rips, and she gets contaminated with this drug that makes her a complete like supernatural type of powers where she can see everything and do everything and learn every language and fight every type of style she can fight. And she's becoming more and more powerful all the time. And again, it's a fun movie. And then, you after watching it, you realize, oh my God, this is the same guy who made these other movies. It's like, where has he been for the last 20 years? And apparently they're going to make a sequel to it because it made a pretty good chunk of change. And I think it's also catapulting Scarlett Johansson into even bigger films, because I remember after this came out, they were starting to throw her name into putting her into some of the anime movies that they're planning on making.
Yeah, we talked about that she was like, I love her. I don't care what she's in. As long as it's not crap, I try to watch it. I haven't seen it. But I mean,
if you think she can kick ass in the Avengers, she can really kick some ass in this kind of film.
And again, the soundtrack was Eric Serra, so he's very loyal, and he sticks with many of his collaborators.
Now, as far as we know, the future for Luc Besson, he does have a movie he's working on right now called Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets. From what I understand, this is based on a French comic book that's been around since like the late 60s, who I hear was one of the many inspirations also for the look of Star Wars and other films like Avatar and stuff like that. This is a very heavy sci-fi looking thing. It looks to be, Fifth Element type of sci-fi, very grand, massive scale. The film is starring Cara Delevingne, which apparently she's going to be on Suicide Squad. Dane DeHaan, who was in Spider-Man 2. He played Osborn. And you also have Rihanna, Ethan Hawke, Herbie Hancock, Rutger Hauer, and Clive Owen. So you're talking about a pretty, big, heavy cast of pretty big names involved in this big sci-fi thing. And they did release some behind-the-scenes footage during the MTV Movie Awards a couple of weeks ago. So just from looking at that, it looks like something that could sort of kind of keep them, in the mix of potentially very good sci-fi movies coming out. But as we mentioned earlier, he's done a lot of other films. He's directed quite a number of other films, but we haven't heard of most of them, and probably neither have you, because most of them are, I think they're foreign films. Most of them must be French, I imagine. So this is a director that, it might be worth your time, if you have the time, to kind of explore, work your way backwards. And with this guy, you can work, there's a 20-year span between the currently now and the mid-90s. There's a lot of material there that you can kind of mine for, to see what he's been up to.
And even if you simply watch the ones that we had mentioned, then that might open up, as viewers, you might find something that you love that we haven't even seen yet,
Well, I'm looking forward to, if they do make a sequel, if they finally get around to making a sequel to Lucy, I'm all for it, because, again, I was so surprised by what a fun movie that was. And it's a perfect vehicle for Johansson. It's perfect for her. Again, coming off a character like Black Widow, it's a good progression. And it's definitely, you get the feel that she's kind of turning into this major action star. I mean, I know she's done serious, she's done some comedy and stuff, but she's a big contender as far as the, female action leads, go. But again, we just talked about this. Look these up. Some of them, half of these movies, I bet you can find them on Netflix without any problems. The rest of them, you can get them, as DVDs on the rentals or streamables. The Fifth Element is probably his peak. Like we mentioned earlier, that's where he peaked. But work your way around it and see, what's your pleasure. If you're into foreign films, you got lots to pick from here. Lots to pick from. Well, I want to thank James for joining me today and helping me go through this list of Luc Besson films. And I will thank you guys, as usual, for listening. And we will see you here at GeekFest Rants. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
I used to be just like you, vulnerable, uncertain, frightened of death. Then everything changed, only 12 hours ago.
Please, I haven't done anything. I'm begging you, please.
You slipped a packet of something very special into your stomach, and you're going to transport it for us. Comply with the rules, and nobody gets hurt.
I'm not in the mood.
It is said that we humans only use 10% of our cerebral capacity, but what if there was a way of accessing 100% of our brain? What might we be capable of? Yes?
Professor Norman, I just read all your research on the use of the brain's capacity. It's a little rudimentary, but you're on the right track.
Thank you.
I'm able to do things I've never done before. I feel everything, and I can control the elements around me.
That's amazing.
We need to meet. Believe me.
The chemical is allowing her to unlock new areas of her brain. She has abilities. They cannot fall into the wrong hands.
Time to go, then.
Miss, don't move. I need you to put your hands up, please.
Her brain capacity is increasing by the minute.
What happens when she reaches 100%?
I have no idea. But she is the key to everything.
I'm gonna drive.
Hey. No, this is a police car.
Most people find that as a compliment.
Thank you. I'm your most humble servant.
Oh dear. Shoo, ghastly beast.
Stop.